What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to
Nissan Almera of the second generation in N16 body in Russia received its share of people's attention, so when its production moved to Korea and Samsung SM3 sedans, renamed Almera Classic, came to us in 2006, the success was predictable. A car familiar to us in an updated form, with a decent set of equipment and at a normal price could not be left out of the market. At the time of its debut in 2006, the sedan was asking from about 360 to 500,000 rubles. The engine range for Russia was limited to one variant, 1.6-liter gasoline engine with 107 horsepower, but the possibility of choosing a gearbox remained. Sales were going well, and in the early 2010s there were even rumors that AvtoVAZ may start producing the Almera Classic under the Lada brand. However, then everything went its own way. Togliatti bet on Vesta, and Nissan in 2013 came out a conditionally new Almera on the basis of Renault Logan. Well, the Almera Classic ended its Russian career in 2012, without even having time to seriously increase in price. By the end of production, prices were still within the range of 450 to 600,000 rubles. The total volume of sales for these years is counted in tens of thousands of cars, so the secondary market for the model is formed quite well. At the time of writing the material on Avito there were about 600 offers. At the same time, the most expensive of them in the current crazy market are estimated at the same money they cost new, 450 to 500,000 rubles. What is left of them after almost 10 years? When it comes to the body, there is still a lot of it left. Despite the age of 10 to 15 years, most of the cars are keeping well against the background of many competitors. Through corrosion is not a frequent thing, and those places that begin to bloom usually can still be saved. Of course, there are welded sills and rear arches, but even under the slightly holy sills there are usually quite alive reinforcements. In the most aged cars you can find visible corrosion on the lower edges of the doors and rust on the edges of the arches. Another potentially problematic area is the side window guides, especially on the rear doors. They sometimes start to bubble. If you dig deeper, you can find more problems, especially in the cavities of the arches. Dirt accumulates in the pockets under the front lockers, and at the back there are no standard fenders and the surface suffers from sandblasting. There is nothing to say about typical problems like chips on a hood and bubbles on an edge of a windshield. There are chances to meet them even on well-groomed cars. However, in general, the body is very well preserved by careful owners, usually even better than the interior. Body repair of Almera Classic is quite realistic and affordable. The range of non-original parts allows you to do without huge investments. And even original parts are sometimes Korean cheap. For example, bumpers can be bought for 10,000. Against this background, buying a non-original even almost makes no sense, as it will cost at least 8. The front fender is available for 12,000, although here a substitute can be found for 5 to 7. For the hood is asked for 25,000, and here the non-original will also save more than twice. But the most obvious example of saving on non-original is a windshield. For firm, they ask under 30,000 rubles, which is unreasonably expensive, and variants of substitutes are within 7 to 15,000. Halogen optics is expectedly inexpensive, 18,000 for the original and 5 to 7 for the analog, and the tail light will cost even cheaper. In general, a car with defects at purchase is not a verdict, and a slight accident will not force to give the car for dismantling. Almera Classic suspensions are a bit simpler than those of the Kia Spectra. In the front there is the same McPherson, but at the rear, despite the presence of shock absorber struts, not McPherson, but a conventional semi-independent beam on longitudinal arms, and with a rotating transverse arm, limiting its lateral travel. Besides, the suspension has been additionally simplified in comparison with the original Almera N16. For example, the front stabilizer of transverse stability has been removed. It, of course, can be bought at the dismantling and put, which is what some owners do. In general, simplicity of suspensions determines their repairability and cheapness of maintenance, although some artificial difficulties can be noted. For example, the front L-shaped levers are routinely supposed to be changed only as a whole, complete with ball bearing and rear silent block in a separate cage. The original lever costs $8,000, although the non-original can be bought at a price from $1.5 to $6,000. Well, in the range of non-original spare parts, of course, there are silent blocks, including the rear, and ball bearings for repressing. And all this can be bought for 300 to 700 rubles. The front hub bearing is changed separately from the hub and is available from 700 rubles, but the rear one will have to be changed together with the hub, giving for it at least 2.5 thousand, while the original is worth 8,000. The shock absorbers, both front and rear, are inexpensive, from 1.5 to 2,000 for a non-original part and a decent analog. Like KYB will cost 3 to 4,000. The rear suspension is also not without complex solutions in the form of levers sold as an assembly. Separately, brakes Almera Classic, of course, got the simplest single-piston disc in front and drum at the rear and rear disc. Mechanisms were not offered even as an option, as in the Kia Spectra. Front discs here are modest on 257mm, but also cost inexpensive. From 5,000 for non-original and 5,000 for firm. Original rear drums for some reason have an indecently high price tag, but substitutes are available from 5,000 in assortment. Pads are cheap, repair kits for reassembly of calipers and replacement of rear cylinders are also available, so brakes at purchase should be examined for condition of handbrake cables and integrity of trunk lines. For the rest, it is possible just to bargain a little discount. Power steering is also typical and simple. If the pump does not howl and the rack does not leak and does not knock, there should be no problems, but the repair will not amaze with prices. The pump GUR with a marking Nissan costs 10,000 and without it from 4 to 10. Even the original rack can be bought for less than 40,000 and the restored and at all from 20. In general, there is nothing to be afraid of here, and inspection will help to estimate the volume of bargaining. As it was supposed to be even in the budget class, Almera Classic provided an opportunity to choose between manual and automatic gearboxes. However, mechanics is not as reliable as many people dream of. The box can pass its 200,000, especially if to change oil at least once in 50 to 60,000, but sharp driving and sport switching can finish synchronizers and bearings of shafts even earlier than 200,000. Their replacement, of course, will cost cheaper than a complete reassembly of the automatic transmission, but it is worth to remember about thin places, and when buying it, you should pay attention not to all vibrations, noises and problems in shifts. In addition, the mechanism of gear selection can be troublesome. In current service, the box is inexpensive, the flywheel here is usual, and the clutch set can be bought non-original for 4 to 6,000. Or save 7 to 8 for the original. The automatic gearbox is a 4-speed RE4 F03A, old, reliable and simple. It is, of course, already affected by the floating torque converter lockup, which contaminates the oil and clogs the hydro block, and the standard oil cooler here is not as big as it could be, but even with all this, the box is capable of more than 300,000 kilometers before reassembly. Of course, the oil should be changed every 50 to 60,000 kilometers, and the installation of a slightly larger external radiator will benefit the unit. However, if it turns out to find a box that was really serviced, it should have a decent remaining resource. Of course, it is necessary to believe not stories of the owner, but documentary proofs of oil change and diagnostics, and also own feelings at test drive. But in general, the Almera Classic is curious precisely because the life of automatic machine can be much higher than that of mechanics. The sedan had several motors in Korea, but our market was left with one, but an excellent one. Engine QG16DE is also the case when simplicity is a guarantee of reliability and resource. Cast iron block, chain-driven timing, distributed injection, a clear proof of simplicity, even there are no hydro compensators here. But there is a successful piston group and 2 repair sizes, which, if well maintained, promises a mileage of more than 250,000 kilometers before the first overhaul and the ability to drive as much after it. The motor has no chronic diseases, all potential problems are usually typical, aging of the catalytic converter, ceramic crumbs from which can finish cylinders, leaky intake, overheating due to a clogged radiator, and so on. It is better not to abuse the resource of chain timing, changing it not by sound, but once in 100 to 120,000 kilometers, though. In theory it can pass times in 1.5 more. Well, in general, the engine without scoring, with normal compression and without knocking of valves should not bring problems for a long time. Taking into account all that we have learned, the choice of a used Almera Classic does not seem to be a difficult task. The body rusts moderately, the engine is reliable, the automatic transmission pleases with resource, except that the suspension is not always stable, and sometimes requires attention earlier than expected, but the volume of investments is modest. Taking into account the budget in 400 to 450,000, it is possible to choose from the best variants and to search for a car on an automatic. From the second owner and with a mileage about 150,000 kilometers, approximately like this, favor options with automatic. Transmission is enough. They were once bought less than mechanics, but a third of the secondary market, it is just cars with automatic. And if Autoteca will confirm accident-free history and honesty of odometer readings and diagnostics will not reveal sudden problems, then you will have all chances to understand why many owners love Almera Classic so much even after parting with it. After all, this is a serious compliment for a budget car. In conclusion, the Nissan Almera Classic presents a compelling option for those considering a reliable vehicle at a price point of 450,000 rubles. Its reputation for durability and low maintenance needs makes it an attractive choice for budget-conscious buyers. However, it's essential to weigh the pros and cons, including factors like fuel efficiency and available features. Ultimately, if you're looking for a dependable car that can withstand the test of time, the Almera Classic could be a worthy investment. Make sure to assess your personal needs and preferences before making a final decision.